Enhanced case management may not be the catchiest title, but this innovative approach to working with troubled young people is helping to reduce offending and is ultimately changing lives for the better.
Yeah, I do think it's good, better for me how to, think differently than to go and do the wrong thing.
Quite often the case that the most effective things are the easiest things, or the things you wish you'd have always thought of. And that's what this is like.
It came from practitioner level, so it didn't come from policy, it didn't come from the strategic level, it came from people working directly with young people going, we think this is working here, and then we thought, well, can that work in the community?
ECM isn't a silver bullet, but a tool to add to a practitioner's current skills, knowledge and experience.
It really is not reinventing the wheel. It's not telling social workers and other youth justice practitioners they've been getting it wrong all through their careers.
But what it's designed to do is support practitioners develop ways in which they can argue for what they already know is good practice.
It's been really positive. You have to try and connect with the young person and understand the young person. It increases their self-esteem and self-worth. It enables them to move on with their lives and achieve.
Is it brand new? No, it's not. Is it a good idea that draws together existing knowledge that can radically transform practice through the application of a fairly simple set of principles? Yes, it is.
Well, what the youth offending team managers were telling us was their staff were now dealing day in, day out with children and young people who kept repeat offending. Even though the numbers in the youth justice system had gone down, the reoffending rate was going up. More complex young people, practitioners starting to feel like that whatever they do, it's not making a difference. They know they can make a real difference with most of the kids they work with, but there's this difficult to help bunch of young people. And they were puzzled by why this was the case.
It was time to dig a little deeper.
We looked at all the information that the Police National Computer collects on children who'd had 25 or more convictions. We found out that the majority of them were boys, 16 or 17, being arrested for not what we would call very serious offences, but lots and lots of offences. Got a couple of our staff to go into 10 youth offending teams across Wales. They looked at 100 odd cases in very minute details, and we painted a picture of a very mixed up bunch of young people. Troublesome, yes, but very troubled as well.
The research confirmed what many already know. Some young people have had a pretty tough upbringing. Nearly half of those researched had witnessed violence in the family, over half had been abused or neglected, and over 60% were still coming to terms with some form of trauma. The YJB now believe that without addressing deep-rooted issues, there can be little headway in dealing with offending behaviours, and the latest science confirms this thinking.
Well, as human beings, we interact with the world around us through our senses. Auditory input, visual input through what we see around us, whether it's things that we touch. All of that information comes in through our senses, travels up into our brain, and neural cells fire electrically, and they each connect one to another. So there's an actual physical representation of the experiences that we have, particularly as very small children. So as the young child experiences and interacts with its environment, the way that the child is responded to when it's upset and distressed, the care that it receives or doesn't receive, or if it's living in an angry or abusive or a neglectful environment, that child will become, in its brain and in its later function, a reflection of those experiences over time. So when we, much later on in the child's life, become involved because of their offending behaviour, and we know that there's been a troubled history, we can go back, look at that history, so that we can plan the way to intervene and undo some of that damage.
Evidence shows that when children experience trauma in early life, they find it hard to trust others, even those who want to help them. This is where a new approach is needed and is at the heart of ECM, the trauma recovery model.
What we've tried to do with the trauma recovery model is take a wide range of psychological theories and criminological theories and combine them together to make one simple sequential model.
Trauma recovery, take one.
The first layer is about creating stability, to try and create a sense of safety for the young person. So in order to do that, what you would need is to create as much consistency, predictability and reliability that allows them to create a much more of a secure base for themselves. So once a layer of stability is created, young people are much more able and willing to engage in relationships. So the next layer that builds upon that initial layer is about building trust and relationships with other people. This is absolutely key layer in terms of your intervention with the young person. So what you notice in terms of their presenting behaviour is that they may smile more, they look less angry, they may still have problems with their relationships with their peers, but they are much more able to build relationships with one or two adults. So what we suggest at this point is as much one-to-one work. It doesn't matter if you play football in the park, if you watch telly, you do jigsaws, you do colouring, you blow football with a Malteser and a couple of straws. What is key is that you do lots and lots of one-to-one work with that young person. What you find when young people have built a relationship is that young people are beginning to want to disclose about some of their past experiences. Those disclosures quite often are indirect in the first instance rather than direct. They may talk about things that happened to someone else, or they may write a poem, or they may draw a picture. Quite often subsumed within that is a disclosure about actually what's happened to them, but it's too painful to directly make that disclosure. We very commonly get a direct disclosure several weeks later. What that often leads to is a need for specific intervention to process that trauma. In some cases, it may be that the social worker or the yacht worker or the support worker is sufficient and can provide the opportunities for young people to work through that. In other cases, it may be that they need specialist therapeutic intervention. Introducing these cognitive type interventions too early can be counterproductive because the young person is not yet able to think cognitively because they're still processing their own trauma. So once young people have developed a sense of insight into their own behaviour, this is a good time to start planning for the future. The key element here in terms of the yacht intervention is to scaffold that future planning. Rather than expect young people to go ahead and sort their whole future out for themselves, it needs to be scaffolded and supported and structured. If we think about our own children when they go off to university, for example, we don't expect them to just manage all that for themselves. We support them through it. We help them with application forms. We help them with going to interviews. We take them there. We do lots of scaffolding in order to allow them to plan for their own future. The top layer of the TRM is about confidence. It's about allowing young people to develop a sense of their own autonomy. In order to do that, they need to have a safety net, providing somewhere that young people can phone occasionally, can come back to occasionally, so that they have somewhere to report back to when things are going well or when things are going badly. The TRM is about sequencing interventions. Each layer builds upon the one that precedes it.
Reducing reoffending might matter a lot to us, and it's obviously very important for the children and the young people, but really it's just a symptom of the wider problems they've got in their lives. And one of the great things about the approach is it's those problems that are being looked at first. So they're finding that they can engage better in education, they're finding that they can get a job, they're finding that their relationships with their families are improving, and their families are thinking more highly of them. So I think some of the key benefits are outside what we as public servants or people who gather statistics, they're outside of what we look for, and they're wider and deeper and actually more beneficial.
ECM relies on a multi-agency approach with clinical input to understand where a young person is at, where they're coming from, and importantly, where they want to get to, setting a secure base for tailored and timely interventions based on developmental need. The case formulation meeting led by the senior psychologist includes social workers, yacht workers, school staff and other professionals working with the young person. It's a chance to pool information and involves creating a timeline of an individual's life, revealing patterns in behaviour and painting a memorable picture. Together, the team formulates a hypothesis as to why the young person is the way they are, and developmental mapping is another vital part of the process.
The developmental mapping process is a rough and ready guide to understanding that child's functioning. What we would do is look at the various areas of development, so physical development, cognitive development, social development and emotional development, and then compare that to the child's chronological age.
At the end of the meeting, the psychologist shares a written report with all those who've attended.
It doesn't just end with the case formulation meeting. There are regular reviews, monthly or bi-monthly, depending on the needs of that individual child. There's also additional support for the practitioners through clinical supervision, because it provides support for practitioners who are working with really difficult young people.
Understanding why a young person has got to where they are is key. It's here that another useful tool, the genogram, is used to create a vivid picture of the young person's family history.
Well, a genogram is a graphic representation of a series of relationships. If you think of what most people would talk about as a family tree, you would have the parents and the children and so on, and there would be lines between various individuals to map those relationships. If we see a graphic representation of something, we are more likely to remember it and retain that information. It can help us to simplify what are really very complex family situations where there are multiple changes within families. It can help us to communicate really effectively with the family, but also with fellow professionals and colleagues. And arguably most importantly, it keeps discussions about young people and their challenges extremely child-centred.
Quite often these young people maybe have had 20, 30, 40 different social services or yacht workers in their time, and they don't trust people, they're not getting any continuity. So this enhanced case management approach means that they can build a relationship with somebody, they can trust them. If they then feel that they can disclose maybe something that's happened in their life beforehand, they can do that, and then the support and interventions can follow appropriately.
I commenced working with this young girl at the age of 14, subject to a referral order, and I had great difficulty engaging with her. I used to turn up for appointments and she used to refuse to see me or be rude and aggressive, and I felt I wasn't engaging with her. We engaged in the ECM training, and I took a different approach to working with her. What she said to me was, the work that you're doing with me now means something to me. So we reflected on that and said, what do you mean by that? And said, well, the work that you did with me prior was just worksheets and it didn't mean anything to me. So it's about connecting with young people and doing something that's meaningful with the young person to promote change.
I think some of the feedback we've had from young people so far has really made a huge difference to their behaviour, but also recognising their behaviour and the likelihood of them hopefully not offending in the future, but also not just that, having a proper life, a job, an opportunity, engaging in education again as well. So some of the individual examples are really positive so far.
And for 19-year-old Jason, this new approach is making a big difference.
I reckon I got dragged up, didn't really have a good childhood, seen a lot of things that I didn't want to. Drugs and fighting and arguing and that. I don't think it's fair for a young child or a kid to go through what I've gone through.
Jason struggled through his school life, and his unhappiness and traumatic childhood was to spill over into violence as he committed his very first offence.
I think it was either 10 or 11, played on the park with my friends. I ended up running into a goal post, knocking myself out then, because my cousin was laughing at me, thinking it was funny. I decided to beat him up and break his ribs. You know, it started happening from there really, fighting and stealing and setting fires to things and burglary and all sorts.
Over the years, Jason has had support from many agencies and social workers.
I never got on with them. They want answers from me, what's going on in the house. I just think they always wanted something off me, so I just never liked them and never got on with them. I just never used to want to tell them things I wanted to, because I know I couldn't trust them.
At the heart of it all he was unable to trust anyone.
Well, it takes a lot of time to tell a person, yeah, to trust them, to tell them something that's big, like self-harming or, I don't know, drugs. You can't keep it to yourself, so how are they going to trust you to tell you things that they want to tell you, but they can't?
But Jason's trust is now slowly being rebuilt with his youth justice worker.
For an ECM, it's a lot more like bouncing back, isn't it, you know? How are you? You're right, yeah, and then, having a proper conversation, more supporting.
Jason believes the ECM approach is helping him make positive steps to a much brighter future.
Yeah, I do think it's good, like better for me, because it really is good how to, think differently than to go and do the wrong thing.
These kids are the ones that we failed to help, and if we're going to actually help them, we need to get better. Trauma-informed practice, everybody seems to be talking about it, but I think we're one of the few places that's actually doing it, getting results. It's not just us that's looking at this and feeling excited, it's everybody who sees it, it's everybody who works with it. We have youth services, people from children's adolescent mental health services, wider children's services. We're getting interest from as far afield as Australia. It's a no-brainer. You're getting the kids to a place where they realise that this is just the best thing for them, and why wouldn't they?